Racing continues to the Breeders' Cup, and this time we're going to the city of brotherly love, the fighting city of Philadelphia, and Parx, and the Grade 1 Pennsylvania Derby, a 7-horse field with 4 legitimate contenders for the win spot. Let's take a look, starting at the rail, and the claim of the year may be Math Wizard. He was claimed in 3 straight races, 16,000, 16,000, and 25,000. And since then, he has a 2nd place finish in the Ohio Derby, a 3rd place finish in the Indiana Derby, and he even went to the mountains and finished 6th in the West Virginia Derby, losing to Mr. Money both of those times in his last 2 races. So Math Wizard, he's kind of tested Mr. Money a couple of times. You know, his best races have been kind of attacking going into the turn. He's got a nice running style, and his runner-up effort to Owendale back in the Ohio Derby was a nice win. I like the way when Owendale took the lead, he really dug in and kind of fought him all the way to the wire that time. I'm just not so sure he's held up that form. And most recently in the West Virginia Derby, he was kind of just outrun, especially the latter half of that race when Mr. Money really got good the last 2 races. So Math Wizard at the rail, going to be about 15-1, maybe 18-1 on the board. And I guess if you like him, you're going to have to hope that he improves off his last 2 races. On his best day, a Brisnet speed figure of maybe 96 or 97. I think he's probably in the current form is going to run about a 92 Brisnet speed figure in this race. Meanwhile, Improbable, he was one of the top Kentucky Derby contenders heading into 2019 and then disappointed in a couple of his efforts. He ran 2nd in the Rebel to Omaha Beach. Then he ran 5th to Maximum Security in the Kentucky Derby. Of course, Country House officially awarded the victory in the Kentucky Derby. Then he was bet down to the favorite in the Preakness Stakes. Never really fired, although the inside rail was live that day. So he kind of ran against the bias, Improbable did. Then he picked up a facile win in the Shared Belief Stakes. That was a group of 3 tomato cans, and not much was really learned in that race. Now, 105 Brisnet speed figure, I'm not buying the hype on that race. That was not a nice looking win. You know, he's working steadily for this race. He ran against a couple of nice race winners in Omaha Beach. I guess his Arkansas Derby win was probably 2nd place finish, was probably his best race this year, but he really had no excuse against Long Range Toddy off the layoff. Now, the jockey may have made a little bit of an error there, making a move too soon, Drayton Van Dyke to take the lead, but he was outrun near the finish line. And ever since then, I've always questioned his ability to get the 1.25 mile distance. I think he's probably going to be long-term best at a mile, but you got to go after these Grade 1 races, and he's probably in good form. Mike Smith has won the Pennsylvania Derby a couple of times, so he gets a good rider in that spot. Son of City Zip, I guess, you know, I think, you know, he's going to get a good trip here because Maximum Security is probably going to get pressured on the front end from Mr. Money. And I have a feeling what's going to happen here is somebody's going to pick up the win after somebody else does all the dirty work. But Improbable, a live contender. Make sure you get the 4-1 though. He's 3-1 morning line, and I'm just not sure he's that likely of a win contender. Shanghai Superfly, 0 for 8 lifetime. I'm not really sure what he's doing in this race. He's a local horse from the fighting city of Philadelphia, and I think he's going to be about 75-1 to really win this race. Just hasn't won a race. He's ran some maiden claimers. He's ran some maiden special weight, and he's not really a win contender here, and wouldn't be surprised if he scratched. I think they're just trying to pick up some purse money. War of Will, this is an interesting horse. You know, he won the Preakness Stakes. Problem is there, everybody kind of attributed that to the live rail that day, and he rated behind horses, and 3 or 4 of those horses, even though it was a 13-horse field, he really got the perfect trip. Half the field couldn't go 1 mile and a 16th. There was some fast fractions put up on the board. War of Will kind of tucked in and then opened up a commanding lead and then held off ever fast late in that race, and then Owendale made a move too late, running against the rail bias. So in the Kentucky Derby, we know he was running freely at the rail and then got checked going into the turn when Maximum Security came in on him, clipped heels with him. Then he was out running the Belmont, but that was running in all three legs of the Triple Crown. So he definitely was a tired horse in that race. But then he came back and kind of flopped against Tax in the Jim Dandy. And where does he really sit with this field? You know, he had an uncontested lead early on in that race. Now, that may have worked against him. I think sometimes, you know, he did have to take the lead because nobody else really wanted it. But some horses just aren't a front runner. And you got to remember in the Risen Star and the Lecomte, he kind of tracked that first quarter of a mile up to a half a mile and then opened up coming into the turn. I think that's really how he wants to run his best race. So I think he's going to sit a little bit behind Mr. Money in this race and then try to make that move. I think he's working a little bit better coming into this race than he did the Jim Dandy. And I think War of Will is going to run a big race here, and he may benefit if Maximum Security and Mr. Money hook up at that half mile and really engage in a protracted speed duel. So War of Will, I think, is going to run a good race here. War of Will is going to be my top selection. I haven't really picked him yet this year. I've always questioned his dirt pedigree long distance. He's always had that turfy pedigree. He's always had a turf stride. But I do think he's going to run better from off the pace. I think he gets two speed horses to run at, and I like him being outside of Math Wizard. He should get a clear run to the lead. It's really just a matter of how good Improbable runs in this race. Spun to Run won the prep for this race, the Smarty Jones, son of Hard Spun. Going to be interesting to see what he does here. I think his best race is on the lead or fighting for the lead, and he's got to face other horses like Improbable and Math Wizard and whatever. I just think Spun to Run is not going to get a good trip in the Pennsylvania Derby. Now, Mr. Money, this horse getting a lot of hype coming into this race. He's won 4 in a row, and he has really run some fast races. He ran a 101 Brisnet speed figure in the Matt Win, ran a huge race in the Indiana Derby, and then a perfect trip in the West Virginia Derby. And I really like the way he really improved the last 2 races. I think that last speed figure could have been a 102 or 103. I'm not sure. I think he was shortchanged a little bit. And this horse is always showing some talent. I mean, he did win a Churchill Downs maiden special weight race last fall in a mile and a 16th. And then he kind of just didn't run really well in the Risen Star and the Louisiana Derby, and then started off on the win streak. Mr. Money, he's 4-1 on the morning line. I think a lot of people are going to pick this horse. I think he's going to be sent to the lead. And I think if he gets to the lead, he could be very tough here because I'm not sure the fractions are going to be really fast. And I like the fact that he is inside of Maximum Security. Mr. Money, definitely one of my top 2 selections. I'm going with War of Will. My second choice is Mr. Money, but Mr. Money, a live contender, the son of Golden Sense out of a Tisnow mare. A couple of my favorite horses there in the pedigree. And I really think a mile and 16th, a mile and 8th really fits him well. If he wins this race, I think he won't run in the Breeders' Cup Classic. I think he's going to run in the Dirt Mile. But Mr. Money, a contender to win here at Pennsylvania. And rounding out the field, the controversial Kentucky Derby. And he won that race, but then was disqualified. And I don't know what to do with Maximum Security. You know, I still think his Florida Derby was trip-aided and bias-aided. The Kentucky Derby was a sloppy racetrack. Then he lost in the Pegasus to King for a Day. A lot of people are forgetting that. That was a 6-horse field, and King for a Day was gutted in that race and just didn't run in the Haskell. In the Haskell, he beat Mucho Gusto. I've always been dubious of that horse getting 9 furlongs, and he did run some fast splits that day. He's a game horse. I guess I'll give him that. But I don't like the fact his best races come in 6-furlong fields. He's got another small field relatively in this race. At some point, all of these 4-furlong workouts that are extremely slow, this horse has to have issues. You just don't work out a horse like this. None of his other horses of this trainer work out like this. And this horse is going to, when he collapses, he is going to not show in one of these races. I just can't play this horse with any confidence. If you like Maximum Security, I guess you're just going to rely on his class and maybe being able to just take him wire to wire. But boy, these are the type of horses when they finally falter, they go down hard. So Maximum Security has the speed figures, he has the class, but long term, he just is not going to have a long career. And I just hate being on the wrong side of these horses when they finally, when the gig is finally up and the injuries finally surface. So Maximum Security on the outside, going to try to take him at a short price. That's the problem here. You're never going to get 8-5 price on this horse or a 7-5 price horse. He's probably going to be 3-5. He was 4-5 in the Haskell. Could be 3-5 in this race, maybe 4-5 again, I guess. I guess fair odds would be 6-5. If he gets 6-5, I guess I'd take him if I didn't like anybody else, but I just like Mr. Money and War of Will a little bit better, and I guess I'd lean towards Improbable. So that's a look at the Pennsylvania Derby, Grade 1, 9 furlongs. It's a win and you're in for the Breeders' Cup Classic. We're going to have previews of the Cotillion coming up. We've also got a recap of the Iroquois Stakes from last week as we race you up to the Breeders' Cup. Don't forget, hit subscribe. More race videos coming, leading you up to the Breeders' Cup. Ring that bell for notifications. And who do you like in the Grade 1 Pennsylvania Derby from Parx?